Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We do have a couple of agenda changes we're going to add under public participation. Reverend Derek Shelby talked to us on taxes. Under presentation, we're removing Judge Collins. She'll be back in early January to speak with us about domestic violence grants. And then under Chairman's report, we're going to add fiscal year 18 budget update and opportunities. With that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Booker?
Here.
Boomer? Here. Crosby? Here. Fellers?
Here.
Twadusha?
Here.
Durrell?
Present.
Goral?
Present.
Hoffman?
Present.
Jury? Kelly?
Here.
McDonald?
Present.
Nicolosi?
Here.
Red? Present. Salgado?
Present.
Schultz?
Here.
Tassoni?
Present.
Webster?
Here.
Westcott?
Present.
Wilson?
Present.
Biondo?
Present.
19 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Mullins. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Fiducia for the prayer and pledge, and I'll ask everybody to stand up, please.
Lord, thank you for this day. We ask you watch over all Winnebago County employees and their families. Please remember all the military, police, and EMS workers throughout this great nation, and give the board the wisdom to do the best in making decisions which will affect all of us in this county. In your name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about right now. I'd ask Angel Martinez and his family and coach and sponsor and anybody with Angel to come on up, please. So a couple of weeks ago, over the last several months, we've read about Angel and his continued success in boxing. And a couple of weeks ago, I had the honor of meeting him, and he's going to speak for a few minutes, and I think you're going to be as impressed as I was when I had the honor of meeting this young man. With Angel tonight is his coach, Jimmy Goodman, Angel's sponsor. Angel's brought his uncle and some family members as well. And I'm going to read a quick proclamation here. A proclamation in recognition of this outstanding young leader in our community. Whereas Angel Martinez has won numerous championships in the sport of boxing, he was named the 2014, 16, and 17 United States National Champion, 2017 National Youth Champion, and 2017 National Golden Gloves Champion. And whereas Angel Martinez's most recent accomplishment was winning the 2017 USA Youth National Championship, the Outstanding Boxer Award, and is ranked number 1 in Youth Men's Division at 108 pounds by USA Boxing. Whereas Angel won a spot on the 2018 High Performance Team in the Youth Division and will be traveling to Colorado, Russia, Argentina for training. And whereas at 17 years old, Angel is the most decorated amateur boxer in Rockford since bronze medalist Kenny Gold in 1988, a name I think many of us remember. He is on course to represent the United States in the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo, Japan. Whereas Angel Martinez honorably represents his home community, Winnebago County, and Auburn High School by his dedication, achievement, and positive example to other young leaders. Now therefore be it resolved, I, Frank Haney, Chairman of the Winnebago County Board, do hereby recognize Angel for his numerous accomplishments accomplishments in boxing and for all his hard work and dedication in making these achievements possible. Let's give Angel a big round of applause.
Really all I want to say is that without my family, my friends, and my city that support me, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. And I don't take that support for granted, and I'll take the support as far as I can take it. And thank you.
I told Angel there's a few of you I'm going to have him rough up. If the votes go a different way or something.
We feel the same way.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Westcott. That was good. Hey, thank you. Take that with you, sir. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. You guys doing all right? Thank you. Keep up your work.
True Mr. Westcott fashion, touche. As well done. Thank you again, Angel. Next item of business, public participation, Reverend Derek Shelby. With that, I will read the disclaimer. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers may not address a zoning matter which are pending before the ZBA, zoning committee, or the county board. Personnel matters or pending or threatened litigation may not be addressed in open session. An individual may speak a maximum of 3 times per calendar year on the same topic. This prohibition shall include the repetition of the same topic in a statement of what is purported to be a different topic. Personal attacks or inappropriate language of any sort will not be tolerated. Merry Christmas, Mr. Shelby. Reverend Shelby, thank you for being with us.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Haney. Matthew chapter 23, verse 33. The Lord Jesus said this, "Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell?" Listen to this. Now much of this is a document from 2015. Now much of everything east of Alpine is home to 84% of development in Rockford. That means out of every $100 of tax money they took out the city, they spent $84 on the east side. Now Mr. Biondo was always talking about taxation, not representation. And I read his article about home rule and the tax levy Sunday, but now listen. If you take $20 million, 50 years, the last 50 years, which is on the low end, out the west side, that's $1 billion, y'all. That's $1 billion in tax money, plus that they've taken out the west side. Now listen, and they put a dime back. Have any of y'all rode through the west side lately? They turned it into a ghetto. Green Street, Chestnut Street. They only finished the part of State Street. Only about 30% of it, 70% ain't done. Jefferson, Andrews, School Street, they all ghettos. They ain't put a dime back. How can you escape the damnation of hell? Everybody in this room is going to meet Jesus one day. I don't care what you believe, where you go to church at. Mr. Biondo was talking about taxation without representation.
Reverend Shelby, do not specifically
I like
refer.
Mr. Biondo. Huh? You know, he
So
don't
do I,
like me,
Mr.
but I don't give a damn. But anyhow,
Reverend Shelby,
Yes,
watch
sir.
the language, please.
84% of the growth on the east side of Rockford. 30% of the people on the west side are not black people. It's a shame that y'all stole. I don't know how much the budget is in the county, but I did some research, and they get $28 million per year thereabouts out of property taxes. The county don't put a dime back, not one dime. Every one of us is going somewhere when we meet Christ, and I tell my church, you can wake up one morning, it's your last day on the planet. It's your last day on the planet, you don't know it. They had that man got in a car accident in McChesney the night before last. He's dead. Mr. John Anderson lived 84 years old and he's dead, I'm gonna die and everybody's gonna die. And you're gonna meet the Lord Jesus, and he said, if you've been a wicked person.
Thank you, Reverend Shelby. We're at 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
You too, sir. First of the year, I can talk about race 3 times.
Everybody has the one-liners tonight. Everybody does. May I please have a motion? May I please have a motion to approve the minutes from November 21st, 2017 meeting and to lay over the minutes from December 7th, 2017. I have a motion by Mr. Nicolosi, a second by Mr. Boomer. Any questions on the minutes before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Minutes approved. Thank you very much. Announcements and communications, Clerk Mullins.
The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Okay, thank you very much. Clerk Mullins, next item of business, board member correspondence. Any questions, comments by board members this evening? Seeing none, I will move on to the chairman's report, and if you'll indulge me here, I'm just going to take a few minutes and give you an update on some budget items and some opportunities here going into 2018. I put this up on the screen not to direct it at the board, not to direct it at the community, but to kind of challenge myself and my staff going into 2018 as we got to continue to look for the best ways to serve our community. Here are some challenges that I want to kind of make sure as we go into the new year that we're very clear-eyed about where we've been, what we've done with the budget to this point, and also some things that we're looking at in 2018. I do not want to lose the context around these discussions, because when they become chopped up into little bites, then sometimes we miss the whole in the context, and then we get off base. And with a lot of the rhetoric and noise in some of the budget discussions, I just wanted to share kind of a synopsis of where I see things. Obviously, many public entities are struggling to find sustainability in their budgets, not a new concept. We talked about that for several months in the budget process. We know that there has been a gap and there remains a gap between revenues and expenditures. We know that revenues are not expected to dramatically increase in the next several years. We've talked in great detail in our finance committee, in Mr. Biondo's finance committee, about the tax burden facing our region and our state. And we've talked a little bit about our overall tax base and some of the migration of wealth outside of the region. We've also, this should not be news to any board member, but again, as part of context, just reminding the board of discussions we've had as we go into the new year. It plays very closely into some things that we're talking about. Winnebago County has spent $18 million in reserves since 2005. $5 million of that coming from healthcare reserves between 2014 and through this 2017 fiscal year. $11 million came from reserve spending under the 1% in the general fund. $2 million just in this last year, and that will be finalized here very shortly as we roll into the new year with the audit and with Carla and her team closing out the books on fiscal year 17. One of the things that gets confused in a very complex, large county budget, just how big is our overall budget, all sources. You know, we're in the range just shy, just underneath of 190 million. However, when you look at the funds we have the most control on, a lot of our funds are dictated to us by statute, they're restricted, it's passed through, but when you shrink it down, it comes down to two primary funds. Our general fund, which is projected at $49 million, and our 1% public safety tax, projected this year at about $28 million. So when you look at a lot of our budget discussions that Carla and Mr. Biondo have kind of led in finance discussions, they tend to be around these two primary core funds. Our we reserve spending this year is a question, because we obviously went through a very difficult budget process. We knew we had a big gap. We made cuts. But the question then became, well, did we clean up all of our reserve spending in fiscal year 18? No, we did not. We are reserve spending this fiscal year. Again, as a reminder going into the new year, we did not create a sustainable path forward, but we did take some steps forward, there's no doubt about it. We are spending in fiscal year 18, $500,000 for host fees brought in on a one-time basis for one-time projects. And we are currently allocating $655,000 from reserves brought in to cover this budget gap. One of the things, and this is not meant to relitigate history, but I think this points to the fact that when you do this, you have limited options. You have limited other good options. The 2016 jail bond refinance for public safety operations restructured bond debt to pull approximately $3 million per year into public safety efforts. We pay about $9.6 million in interest and extended the loan for 10 years. And I don't say that for any other reason than to say that smart people looked at this and realized that was an option to have a surge, to look at, to address public safety concerns. I remember those conversations vividly as a candidate for chairman when those occurred on the board. And again, this speaks to the limited other options facing the last administration. Why is more reserve spending not necessarily recommended at this time, or at least there's concerns about doing so? Number one, I want to make sure we're clear, there's been confusion about this. Carla, as a first-year county administrator and CFO, had very thorough, detailed discussions with Moody's. And she said, we're taking a very hard line, we're going to look at things very objectively, be very transparent, build good partnerships. The Moody's folks shared with her concerns about our trajectory of reserve spending. That wasn't her opinion, that's what they shared with her. She assured them that this was going to be a very difficult budget cycle. We were going to take a very hard look at the budget, which I believe the county board has. We talked about a 3-month cash balance reserve policy and talked about that with our general fund and our 1%. McHenry County has had a $6 million cash balance for their core funds. They've lowered that to $5 million and rebated tax. They did a tax rebate to their taxpayers. But just so we compare apples to apples, so when you see a Facebook post and they're saying we did a rebate on property taxes, they had a much higher reserve amount in which to have that conversation. Public safety building is a concern to me. We are going to look at fiscal year 18 about a plan. This is not a new topic as well. Again, we're just pulling together a lot of different pieces that are before this board for consideration in the next 12 months. And we're looking at somewhere in a couple $1 million perhaps to tear it down. Yes, we could look at other options, and before we start tearing things down, we will have a very thorough analysis and we'll have a lot of discussions with the board, but we could be in a position of having to spend money from reserves or to bond out to rip down the building. In 1974, according to Mr. Booker, I was 1 year old, so I'll reference my good friend Mr. Booker, we had a lot of law enforcement under one roof, right? We had the city and the county under one roof. Today we have 5 roofs. So one of those roofs, with the city of Rockford moving out, will probably need to come down, or we'll have to have other plans for that building. One of the things we talk about with reserve spending or host fee spending, bringing that in, is one-time versus annualized. So we do a reserve spend and we put $1 into the budget, and then we only have to do it one time for an emergency or a crisis or a project such as the PSB, then we don't have to necessarily fund it next year. When we put it into a salary, when we put it into operations, then it's something we got to find that same dollar for next year and the year after. So I just wanted to draw that distinction. This is by far the most important thing I'm going to share with you tonight. These are the things ahead for this board. And I think it's a sobering list.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Can we put that over a little bit?
Yes. Can we fix that? You tell me.
Trying to just take it out of full screen so they can get this.
Go ahead and do that. That better? Yeah, there we go. Sorry, guys. Thank you, Mrs. Red. Here are 7 things that are not budgeted in fiscal year 18. This will not be news to Mr. Biondo and the Finance Committee. A number of these things were specifically discussed, but again, we're a quarter into the year, and sometimes things lose context as we go forward. Number 1, the FOP courts contract will start January 1 here in just a few weeks. FOP sheriff's contract will be retro back to October 1st of 17. The big AFSCME contract as well. The circuit clerk AFSCME expired about the same time. One of the things that we're talking about now is the insurance stop loss increase of about $400,000 based on loss history. Healthcare increases are always a variable. I want to give Carla a lot of credit for taking hold of the healthcare situation. I think there's more strategy work we can do ahead, and I think there's some opportunities there to deliver a world-class plan the most affordable way possible, but she really did a great job out of the gate with that. But then we have something that I think is a long-term strategy of actually funding a capital plan. You know, Gus and IT, or just our overall capital plan, has been asked by the board, but then the bigger question is, you know, how are we going to fund a capital plan 3 to 5 years planned out? And I think those are things that we have to look at the next year. And I know, again, for the returning leaders on the board, for you veterans, you know this, we have made a lot of cuts since the recession hit. A lot of tough discussions have happened. So just because a new administration or a couple new board members come rolling in, it's not the first time we've talked budget at the county. Since September of 2008, we have 342 less employees full-time and 167 part-time. I talked to Joe in Highway, and he said that between, I believe, 2014 and 17, there's been about a 20% decrease in his budget, and we all know how important infrastructure is to the region. What are we doing? What has been done? Again, this was a tough year, our first year as a new administration. We reset the budget, making sure that the numbers coming to the board were verified by our professional staff. In professionalizing county government is having our professional staff, Molly, the finance director, Carla, CFO, and now county administrator, making sure that what's coming to the board is accurate and been fact-checked. There's been a full-throated effort to that. And in every case that I've observed, the information being shared is attempting to be, at every turn, shared in an honest and thoughtful way with our partners on the board. We centralized some healthcare costs. And again, we've burned through $5 million in reserves, and I think that was a good first step for Carla to make this year. The county miscellaneous fund was redistributed back to the departments based on actual strategy and true cost to the departments. And we, of course, adopted a fund balance policy. You know, I think that there's been some very good discussions at the Finance Committee leadership level. I'm really excited with our new auditor coming in from Baker Tilly about some board training and about some strategies, and also about really diving in on the audit results that we get hit with this year, on really digging deep into them. Now that we've reset the baseline, now that we have a baseline in which to have a lot of good strategic discussions, and that took a lot of time and energy in the first year. You know, we're inviting in outside eyes. We've done that. We are going to continue to do that, and we want to make sure that we're being scrutinized. To Carla's credit, she talked to one of the top finance people at UTAS the other day, and he's going to come in and put his eyeballs on budget. We'll take any ideas we possibly can, and of course, in a governing structure, any ideas we believe should come forward to this board for consideration. That's where the decisions are made in terms of the allocation of resources and final budget decisions. I cannot state this enough, though, as we go into 18. We need inside teamwork, because there's still a lot of opportunities, I believe, for us to continue to improve. I'm not going to pretend that the budget has been fun or easy for any department. It hasn't been fun in my office, and it hasn't been fun for this board. Let's not pretend. It hasn't been fun in the sheriff's department or the courts either. However, I think there's opportunities in a crisis. It forces you to look at things you wouldn't otherwise look at if you had all the money to spend that you wanted to have. And that is true in our household budgets. That's true in government budgets. Here's a really cool thing that we'll be talking about with the board in 18. There's a private partner, private sector partner, Field Fastener, the Deary family. They have a great culture, great operation. They have a bunch of their employees trained on lean, the lean process. And that looks at waste in a process. Government is a series of processes. And so he's offered that if we're interested, and I think we should be, maybe to have some of their lean process experts. This is a concept manufacturing folks figured out 20, 30 years ago. It translates to office processes or highway processes, and we can look for opportunities to drive waste or increase efficiency. And now we're partnering with our public sector friends to come in and to just put their eyeballs on our process. It's true for me as well. Sometimes when you're going through something, it takes someone else to look at it. Excited about that. The board, I think, appropriately approved financial forecasting for Carla and the finance department. Thank you very much for that. That will allow us to look into the future, and that way when we're making decisions, having conversations at the finance and board level, we're looking out into the future on that as well. The other thing that'll be coming, it's something that's been promised, we needed a little time on it, but I think this is going to help our conversations, is this Winstat Transparency Initiative with the community, but very directly with this board on reporting out key indicators from each of the departments. We needed a little time. This is a few months later than I wanted it to be, but at the same time, we wanted to be realistic with all the things we're dealing with internally as well. I'm just going to say it, I've said it before, the era of consolidation is here. The clerk recorder item is on the ballot, but I think there's other opportunities to look at. 911 consolidation is being talked about, I think slowly and methodically, and those are tough discussions, but at the same time, I would be remiss if I didn't say that right now, one of the options before that's being talked about would see some savings back to the county when we equitably distribute payments across county taxpayers. A lot more discussion on that. Nothing's coming to the board for consideration at this time, but more information will be coming in 2018. I do think we need to look at election authority consolidation. The Regional Planning Commission might be looking at a consolidation study across governments. How do our 86 units of government work together, share together, but also, do we need 86? Might be a question that we talk about as we look at very trying times. There's a topic called functional consolidation. Basically, it's just working together as if, and you just work together in partnership, whether that's internally in the county or external. One of the things that Carla's on me on a lot is this idea. I talked to Kim Potter about this too today. We have more people doing HR work outside of our HR department around the county than we do inside HR. Let me repeat that. We have more people outside of HR around the county with all the great mission work being done that is very important to this community. But we have more people outside doing HR than we actually do in Kim's department. And I think you might see similar trends in finance and purchasing and other budget-related discussions as well. One of the things I wanted to talk about is this board's commitment to the courts. And this is just my opinion. There's not many privileges you get as chairman, but you do get to share your opinion once in a while, and this is one of those times. Here's some facts on budget. In this past year, the board has allocated the following 4 items to the courts at their request, of course, very well documented. The personnel detention home, $50,000, the court bailiff, $113,700, probation, $173,000, supplies and services, courts and public defender, $49,000. The FOP courts ratified, I think it's in the paper right now, or will be tomorrow. One of the things that I guess is troubling to me about structure is this idea that the FOP courts negotiates a state contract and then we pay for it. And that is not a knock on our people at the courts, it's just a structural oddity that it's not being negotiated by the people that then have to turn around and allocate dollars. 3% a year for 4 years is not a 12% raise. When you compound it, it's closer to a 14 or 15% raise plus base increases. This is not a similar number that I believe other employees will see equitably across the county. Lastly, I just want to be very upfront that I do not believe, and I refuse to have either or conversations. We are elected to be financially responsible, position this county in a healthy manner so it's sustainable, and deliver great services to our community. It is not an either-or proposition. We are going to walk and chew gum at the same time. Something I'm excited about is shared records management. I believe this was happening back in '74, as Aaron referenced. Then we duplicated it. It's time in the coming years through technology to bring that back together, and I think that's a key way to make our community safer. 911 consolidation, according to the fire chief, you heard it yourself, so that's also a public safety issue primarily, me saving money second. The ICJ, Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, Grant Council, the research they are doing and the conversations happening with all our public safety partners is critical to public safety long term, and I'm very excited about that as well. Lastly, they are providing grant money for research around a topic you're going to hear more about in our region, and that's focused deterrence. Chief O'Shea and many other law enforcement, I've heard Sheriff Carroll say this as well. When you look at the 40, 50, or 60 baddest people in this region, in this community, in this town, they are doing a lot of the mischief, a lot of the bad stuff in a focused and a strategic way around catching and putting them away. It has a disproportionate positive impact on safety in the community. And the fact that you see so many people coming together around that is exciting to me. And so I'm going into 18 with this mindset. We're going to continue to have the tough conversations. And I'm going to lean on our partners on the Finance Committee to lead that effort. We're going to ask for our outside people to put their eyeballs on it as well. If there's something that's going to make us better, I'm all in. And I appreciate your help in this process. But I'm also optimistic that we can deliver great services, and I'm not backing away from that in one way, shape, or form. And with that, I won't belabor this. I know we have other business to get onto. But I hopefully that provokes at least some thought and some conversations going into 18 that we may not be able to get to in its entirety this evening. I know Mr. Wilson had a quick question.
Comment.
Yes, sir.
The comment is the lean principles and practices.
Yes, sir.
I've seen that done on not just the production floor, but I've seen it done in planning, in human resources, purchasing. So you're on the right track when you're talking that way. And secondly, you know, I've always said HR needs to be centralized. And I'll leave it at that because I'll keep talking and nothing happens.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, and I appreciate your extra time on the chairman's report tonight. At the next board meeting, we're going to get an update from Carla on some fiscal year 17 numbers, and that she'll be talking with finance and also the whole board as well. So thank you for indulging me this evening. I do appreciate it. Next item of business, consent agenda. I please ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Hoffman on the motion and Mrs. Crosby on the second. Any questions on the consent agenda before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item of business are standing committee reports. Finance Committee, Mr. Biondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution authorizing the settlement of pending litigation. It is $15,000 for an infection in the jail, and it turned out that was about what it would have cost us even if we went to court.
We've got a motion by Mr. Biondo on item B, the resolution authorizing the settlement of pending litigation. May I please have a second? Mr. Hoffman on the second. Any questions by board members on item B under Finance Committee? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
All right, the Finance Committee passed an amended resolution which adopts rules and procedures for Finance Committee budget hearings, and I'll just read the amendment. It was approved unanimously, which is these rules and procedures govern the hearings before the Finance Committee on budget amendment requests involved in pending litigation and supplement general procedures for the county board committees established in Winnebago County Court. The involved in pending litigation allows us to do it we don't want to do it for every case that comes before us. Some of them are just changing various things from one fund to another, and if it's just $1,000 or $2,000, that's not it. So this also then would allow any other pending litigation that comes forth. We'll go into this more stringent policy, and that was a good amendment. So I would like to then move for the resolution adopting the amended settlement of rules and procedures for the Finance Committee budget.
We have an amended motion by Mr. Biondo, and I have a second by Mr. Wilson and by Mr. Hoffman. Any questions by board members on Resolution C before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
The last resolution is authorizing the county contribution for state's attorneys appellate prosecutors program. It's $36,000. All the counties pay an amount for the appellate. Whenever we go into appellate court, the state's attorneys have this prosecutor program. Those people actually prosecute it for us, and that's so I move for its adoption.
We have a motion by Mr. Biondo on item D. May I have a second, Mr. Girl? Thank you very much. Any questions by board members on item D before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Biondo.
And that concludes our report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo. Next item of business, zoning committee, Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. We have no report this evening. We do have a meeting coming next week, December 27th, for the zoning committee. We have a number of items on the agenda. And if I would, I'd like to take just a quick moment. I should have done it under board members' correspondence or whatever. But anyways, I just want to take a moment and thank everybody for all the donations they gave for Carpenter's Place. Look at that bucket over there. And that thing is really overflowing. I think we all give our kids a hand for that. And then if anyone hasn't signed this card yet, we'll send it back around again. And I'll go around. Thank you all. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure they will at Carpenter's Place as well.
It's a great organization, and thank you for your leadership, Mr. Webster. Next item of business, economic development, Mr. Westcott.
Thank you, Chairman. We don't have a report, but we do look at some stuff coming up after the new year.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott. Next item of business, operations and administrative committee. Big shoes to fill tonight. Mr. Jury is probably watching us at home. And Mr. Hoffman will be filling in for our dear friend, Mr. Jury.
I'm not worried about the shoes, just the ego.
You got that too.
Your Operations and Administrative Committee has 3 items. First is a resolution authorizing the execution of a renewal agreement with Sunlight Financial for stop loss specific and aggregate coverage on the self-assured copay, POS, PPO, and HDHP medical plans. I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Hoffman on item B on the stop loss plan. I got a second by Mrs. Gorel. Any questions by board members? Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a huge increase in the premium if you looked at the details for this. And it's an example of the reinsurance being a scenario where if you use it, then you pay a substantial additional penalty for using it. And the good years, we don't get a rebate, but in the bad years, we see a substantial increase. And the comment that I'd like to add is that this is an area that I know we're working on, but it is a cart that can drive the horse. It's an area of expenditure that dwarfs many of our other areas that we spend a lot of time looking at. So I believe we need to evaluate on an ongoing basis alternatives like increasing deductibles, increasing co-pays, going to a much higher deductible plan, possibly adding an HRA plan that would backstop that, and that could be funded by the contributions that would come from employees. Their share of that premium cost could fund an HRA plan, and that would potentially backstop the high deductible plan, so that people that really need it would have some help. That's the purpose of that. And looking at alternative carriers, looking from time to time at alternative brokers to find out if there are other alternatives that our broker's not bringing to the table. The expenditures are so large and the medical inflation is out of control in such a manner that this requires and demands a lot of attention. And the potential, and I'll just share this quickly, and thanks for indulging me. We had a fully insured product where I work. We only have 38 contracts. So family, couple, single, only 38. And we went to a high deductible self-insured plan with stop loss, and our premium cost last year was about $535,000, and this year, including claims, reinsurance, administration, we're going to save $170,000. And I'm not saying that in the context of, oh, we're so good, because frankly, why didn't we do it sooner? But as an example of there's opportunities, and it's large dollar opportunities. Thank you.
What I'm hearing from Mr. Schultz, I absolutely agree with. I would ask maybe in the finance committee that they make that a conversation with Carla as we go into 18. I know that's something that she's looking at closely as well, so there should be good alignment with the board and the administration. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any other questions by board members on item B before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you. Second resolution is authorize the administrator of River Bluff Nursing Home to renew agreements for nursing services, and I so move. Oh. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me say, got it reversed. Oh, you're going to be mad. Okay, I got a resolution awarded proposal for telecommunications line and service audit. And one note at the bottom, there's a number. It should be 81007,
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoffman. We got a motion on item C before the board, the telecommunications line and service audit. I got a second by Mrs. Gorel. Any questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Hoffman.
Okay, now we're to the resolution authorizing the administrator of River Bluff Nursing Home to renew agreements for nursing services, and I so move.
Got a motion by Mr. Hoffman on item D under operations and a second by Mrs. Gorel and Mrs. Crosby. Any questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Hoffman.
That's the end of my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. And Merry Christmas, Mr. Jury, who I'm sure is watching. Public Works Committee, Mr. Kelly.
No report.
Thank you. Public Safety Committee, Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report. However, Animal Services has sent us their greetings, and they said that they had 735 calls for service. They then took 149 dogs, 203 cats, 2 guinea pigs, 3 domestic rabbits, and some wildlife. Okay, and we have sent to rescue or transfer 13 dogs and 13 cats. Here's the happy part. There are 60 dogs that have found homes, 60 cats, and 1 domestic rabbit. I will tell you that there are 3 guinea pigs left at Animal Services, so if it's not too late to give a guinea. So, for all of our animals out there, Merry Christmas to everybody, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see our media partners scribbling, quickly to capture that information. Thank you, Mr. Fiducia. Mr. Westcott.
Mr. Fiducia, can you tell me how many euthanasias there were?
I can, hold on one second. Seconds up, okay. You want totally euthanasia, well, let me do it this way because it's gonna sell it. We've had 48 dogs, 170 cats, 3 bunnies bit the dust, and 11 wildlife.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott and Mr. Fiducia. Next item of business, ad hoc committee, Mr. Nicolosi, Government Affairs Strategic Planning. Would you like to give an update, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I get up, of course.
Yep, come on up.
Thank you, Chairman. The Government Affairs and Strategic Planning Committee has nothing to report on per se, other than we had a pretty very good discussion about defining what the committee does. Right now, we went over a bulleted checklist, a variety of things, and just kind of right now defining on what we're doing and those kind of things. We welcome all board members and the public to attend this meeting. In the future, we'll look to having a more proactive say on what's going down in our government in Springfield and nationally, so that we can be better Winnebago County board members as well. And that's it. If you have any questions, thank you.
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolosi. Next item of business, on any unfinished business, any new business. I'm going to bring back the appointment in early January. It's okay? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard a number of similar statements in our public comment period regarding the judgment of God. And especially because we're celebrating Christmas this weekend, I find it necessary to bring a little balance to that by suggesting that what we're celebrating at Christmas is the generosity, the love, the kindness of God in sending Jesus to die in our place, to take our punishment. God showed his love, and his desire is for us to have life, to have hope, and to have peace. And that at least brings some balance in representing the character of God to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Appreciate that. Any other new business? Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make an announcement, and that is, I am throwing my hat in the ring to replace Margie. I brought my information with me. I got a letter of interest, a resume, and one of the reasons I really felt the need for this, besides my arms getting twisted, was it would be a first if somebody like me would be in that office. It would be the first African American in Winnebago County that is a county clerk. So with that, I do need all of you guys' support if you do. Thanks.
I think we have some breaking news. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Oh, you are prepared.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. I'm going to bring back the appointment in early January, just get a clarification. So we'll bring that for first reading in early January. With that, I would entertain a motion to go to closed session briefly. Motion by Mr. Feller, second by Mr. Nicolosi. All those in favor of going to close signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned to closed session. Thank you very much. Okay, we're back in open session. No action was taken as a result of open session. Merry Christmas, everybody. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Wilson on the motion, Mr. Hoffman on the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Merry Christmas.